I can't remember who it is. Mr. So-and-so. I'm ready for my close-up. Mr.
There's no close-ups.
Mayor.
So how many children were there in the family, and where were you in the lineup?
Oh, there were 3 kids in my family, in my household, and I was in the middle. My sister was a little more, Arlene, was a little more than 2 years older than me, and my brother Mark was about 3.5 years younger than I am.
What were they like, and which one was more like you?
My sister was always delicate. She was a child who was afraid of a lot of things, afraid of doctors, afraid of needles, afraid for my parents to go out at night. And she was also a very empathetic child. She was, nurturing and mothering. She would take me out for walks and try to hold my hand, because I ran a lot, to make sure I wouldn't fall down and skin my knees. She wasn't very much like me at all. Our personalities were different, our interests were different. We both loved music, although different kinds. Once when Bennett Landsman, my former husband, met her at my apartment while we were dating, she came over, we all had dinner together, and then she left to go back to Philly, and he said, "So who was that?" I said, "I told you, it was my sister." He said, "No, really, who was it?"
And when you were growing up, did you guys have any pets?
Oh, I forgot to, and you asked me about my brother, and
Yeah, well,
I
yeah,
forgot.
which one?
So my brother Mark was 3.5 years younger. He was a willful child. He was really high-spirited, very smart, really handsome, and was always on the wrong side of my mother, which I was too, but he got more in her face than I did. So there was a lot of yelling and screaming in my house growing up. My father was totally quiet and peaceful.
Did you get the feeling that, like, they had 3 kids because it just happened, or did they keep going till they had a boy, or?
I actually never asked that question. I did ask my father. He and my mother were so different, and what made you 2 get together? And he said she was a nice girl, and it was like time to get married. He was in his late 20s, so it was time. And she was nice, and that was that. I think that they had a 3rd because they wanted to have a boy. That would be my guess. And they wanted to name. I don't think there were other people left in my father's family, and my mother had no siblings, and they wanted to name somebody after my grandfather Max. And
Right,
that
so
would be
Mark for Max.
Mark for Max.
Describe the house that you all grew up in, and then describe your room. Did you share it with anyone?
Yes.
Or?
We grew up, I have a picture of it. I took it when I went to Camden a couple of years ago. We grew up in a small brick row house in Camden, New Jersey. It was on a small street off of something called Baird Boulevard, which was the nicer street with the nicer row houses. It was really small. There was a little sun porch with windows when you first came in, a very small living room where the steps went upstairs, a small dining room, the kitchen that had like a table, just big. It was really small. And upstairs there was no hallway. You just got up there and there was bedroom 1, 2, and 3 and 1 bathroom. When I was studying music, my father converted our garage into a practice room for me because the kids in the neighborhood would always scream when I was singing opera, make meowing noises. So we then had another powder room on the lower level, but 1 bathroom for the 6 of us growing up.
1 bathroom for the 6 of you.
That's
the 3 kids, the 2 adults,
parents,
and
my
your
grandmother.
mother's mother, Bubba Frida.
So my sister and I always shared a room. When my grandmother was living, she shared a room with the youngest child, that was Mark. And I assume my parents would have felt like they had to move if they could afford it soon, because he was 9 when she died. So it would, they wouldn't have been able to share a room for long.
Did she die at home?
She died in the hospital, but she was only sick for a very short time. She never went to the doctor. She got sick. They operated on her. She had cancer. She was gone in 6 weeks. A very unfortunate thing. But
Describe the room that you shared with Arlene. You have bunk beds or twin
no,
beds
we
or shared a
We
bed?
slept in a double bed, and she always wanted more than her share. I'm not a very moving around sleeper. I like go to sleep and I think if I wake up, I'm in the same position. But it wasn't the sharing the bed that was difficult. We shared a bureau. After my grandmother died, my brother got the little room and we got the slightly bigger room. We shared one bureau and a closet. I am not kidding when I say the closet was this wide, and you would rip open your nails like trying to get your hands between the hangers, and we were always yelling at each other that the other person's clothes took up too much room, or that I had worn a dress of hers without her permission, which I did often.
Do you guys have pets?
There was, my brother and sister wanted to have a dog. I think my father kind of wanted to have a dog, and I did not want to have a dog, not because I don't like animals, but I was really busy. I was taking singing lessons and piano lessons and editor of my school newspaper and blah, 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 and I didn't want any responsibility. So I told them, if you get a dog, it's not mine. So we got this dog, an adorable black Cocker Spaniel, who was really, really stupid. He was sweet. He barked at people he knew, and he didn't bark at strangers. It was really bizarre. And true to my promise, I did not walk the dog very often. Sometimes my mother would push me, but once in my teens, I had a crush on an older boy who lived a few blocks away, so I would volunteer to walk the dog so I could walk it past his house. But I was not cooperative.
What was the name of the dog?
Skippy.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
What were your family's economic circumstances? Do you remember any times when money was tight, and remember anything that you had to do without that you wanted or needed, aside from your own room?
Yeah. Our economic circumstances were modest. I guess you would call us middle income or lower middle income for some period. Sometimes we were middle income, and my father made a little more money. Compared to everybody else in the world, we were not poor. We never had to worry about having enough to eat. There were times when we couldn't buy new clothes for school, and that would either be cut down or moved back to a little later, or maybe we couldn't buy new clothes. But generally, we were fine. We did things like we took piano lessons, and when I was interested in opera, I took singing lessons. I think that was a struggle. My father was the only one who made an income. But we had, ups and downs. But the tight times weren't tight like they were for George or other people where you didn't have enough to eat. You just kind of, sucked in your belt a little.
What were your duties around the house as a child, and what were the other kids' duties?
When my grandmother was living, we didn't have many responsibilities. I mean, we were supposed to clean our own rooms and put our clothes in the hamper and not make a mess. Then I guess when we got to be 10 and 11, maybe that age, or 10 and 12, my sister and I would take turns. My grandmother always washed, and then one of us would dry. Before that age, my mother and grandmother did that stuff together, but my grandmother always pitched in. After my grandmother died, my sister and I, one were supposed to wash and one was supposed to dry. At some point we got a dishwasher, but I honest to God don't remember what year. And we were constantly arguing because nobody liked to wash, and we were always arguing that I washed yesterday. No, I washed yesterday. So as near as I can figure out, our younger brother had no responsibilities in the house. I'm thinking back on it, and I can't think of one. Like we did, well, as we got a little older, we had to iron our own clothes. Like if I was 12 years old.
Was he the one who walked the dog, or?
walked the dog more than any of us. Mark may have walked the dog occasionally in the neighborhood. He was very friendly, had lots of friends, but I don't think he did stuff in the house. He didn't, like my sister and I folded laundry or would take the clothes out of the washer and put them in the dryer, but that's as much as I can remember. We had to, change our own linen or make our own beds, but we didn't have heavy responsibilities. Do the dishes.
When did you learn how to cook and who taught you? Were there any special family foods or recipes? Do you make any traditional family foods?
My mother was not a good cook, and it was primarily because my father had ulcers and she had to kind of cook bland food, so this is not a blame thing. And I think also my grandmother didn't cook with her that much when she was growing up. She made some things that were great. She made great rib roast, she made great apple pie, sponge cake at Passover, but my grandmother was a great cook and a great baker. And my sister had no interest. I think Mark did a little bit when he was beginning to get a little older, but my grandmother did cook with me, like we made kreplach, so she taught me how to make dough and roll it out, and she made gefilte fish, and I would help her grind it. So my earliest skills in the kitchen came from her, and she let me do that stuff. My mother would never let me. It was like, you're going to make a mess, it's just horrible. So I'd say my grandmother first, and what I didn't learn from her, then there was a hiatus from the time I was, less than 13, until I was older and was out on my own. My Aunt Rose helped me learn how to bake a little, but mostly I learned to cook from Julia Child.
Okay.
I really did. She was my